Hello.
Use the water in an efficient way from the lake.
Great. Well, I have family in Lansing, Michigan, and I know the lakes there are gorgeous, and we swim in. You guys swim in them whenever we're there. We get to swim in them for a little bit. Are you right on the lake? Can you describe your property? So you have a lakefront property.
I have a lakefront property. It's on Lake St. Clair. Which, Port Huron. If Lansing to Port Huron's a pretty about an hour away, but I'm on the east side of Michigan, up where Port Huron. Actually, Lake St. Clair meets Lake Huron. So, what I really, I've got quite an extensive garden, and we have been getting extremely hot and dry summers.
I can relate.
Unbelievable. But when it rains, it pours, and then everything floods and runs off. So I'm just not concerned. I want to figure out how I can use the lake to my advantage.
Mm-hmm. I can't relate to having lakefront property, but I can totally relate to hot and dry summers and to when it rains, it pours. And I know plenty of people with.
And then it just runs away.
No matter
how much I cultivate, I've dug little, I don't want to say a trench because that's ginormous, but like a water irrigation for the water to soak in, and then I've mulched around a lot of things to hold it. It washes the damn mulch right away.
Okay. How deep is the mulch?
With the force of the rain. I'm sorry?
How deep is the mulch?
I'd say about 2.5 inches.
Okay.
Sufficient, or what do you think?
Oh, I've done deeper than that. Do you have any living mulch to hold it in place? So like anything with roots to help hold it.
I do.
Okay. Because that's something. I think one of the best things is the roots will help hold the stuff in place, help the mulch.
I've actually planted, but I have planted like some ground cover, just to try and hold water in, because I do realize, and I do know the roots do hold water in. But I'm almost thinking it just gets so saturated. I don't know, and it's washing everything. Now the other thing is that I'm kind of on the property is not level, shall we say. So I was actually thinking about that issue as well, that if I could build like a berm around everything, that it would hold the water in.
Yep. Yeah, that's, I think, very much. Are you familiar with Brad Lancaster's book or Rain Garden Concept?
I am not.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a lot of the stuff I drew from there.
Okay.
But the idea is you want stuff to sink and spread as much as you can. So right now you're probably catching more than you would without what you've done. And as well as sending, mulch down into the lake and stuff too. But you're probably catching more than you would otherwise, right?
Right.
So you just this is your starting point, or where you were before is your starting point. You've upped that a little bit, then get it to sink and spread a little bit more. So take what you're doing and make it so if it's instead of going like a straight line to the lake, or even just like straight line parallel to the lake, if you can make it go from one place to another to the next, so it is like going, I think cascading would be the word, but it's going from like this basin, and then the overflow is the next one, and overflows into another, and then your lake is the last overflow. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely. It does.
It takes a lot more work, but you get to hold on to a lot more water.
Right, because I noticed like my tomatoes and stuff, they weren't as juicy. Cucumbers were fine for some reason this year.
I like water. Oh no, Karen, you're coming in a little choppy from my.
They were missing that extra.
Oh dear.
Oh, she's gone.
Oh no. Well, that was really, I mean, that's a question that just stumps me, Sandy. So they're by the water. Some people have asked, is it okay to do a hugel culture right by the water? Is that something you would do?
I don't know. It would probably depend on where the groundwater level is. Like I would think you totally could. But I know like in Washington, the groundwater level is significantly different than here. And so when that rises, but I don't see why not.
And would that be helpful even?
Probably. Yeah. If you're having, like, if you want to hang on to more water, then the same concepts apply everywhere.
Welcome, Tracy. And Marlon, did you have any questions since you're on early? We have 5 more minutes. And this is just like, if you have any specific questions about your particular property that you want to consult with Sandy, she's just a treasure trove, as I'm discovering, because I don't even know, I don't know a lot of these things. So
I just read the book you recommended me and I know a lot. And it led me to
but it's your experience. It's your experience that you've applied it in so many different ways that I think you're bringing to the table. So where are you going from, Marlon, Tracy, and Karen is back. Thank you. I'm so sorry, Karen, you were a bit choppy there. So if you wanted to type your questions, if your audio is not coming in really well, we can continue the conversation. Marlon and Tracy, same if you want to type in, or, oh, it's Tracy Porter, right? Is that right? Yeah, Tracy, you had Tracy, a better half is actually a geologist. So he knows.
My brother's a geologist.
He's not a geologist.
Oh, so sorry. It's your brother who's a geologist. He's a what? A water?
He's a GIS specialist. So he draws maps for a local water authority.
Cool.
But he understands contours and watershed and all that. He's very helpful.
Okay. So you're probably like way ahead of me on this.
No. I doubt it. I doubt it.
She is here with a waterlog problem in her backyard too.
Okay. That seems to be a common theme I'm noticing. Except for me. I don't have that problem.
Well, Karen had a bit of it since she had no rain in Michigan, but was right by the water. And when it rained, it poured, which is like the case is the growing case really in the trend. The growing trend here in America is it is desertifying in many areas. And so you have that when it does rain, it pours. So
yeah, and the ground can't soak it up fast enough.
Yes, and so that's something
it all gets washed away.
We all need to be prepared for that kind of scenario. Oh, so Tracy, did you have any specific questions or?
I feel like my situation's kind of unique. I'm in North Georgia. I don't know if you know where I'm located. So the soil here is clay mostly. It's rather rich though. But my home has no gutters. So I have a tin roof and it just sheds off. And of course, when we get the rainfall, I have what I call the river. The property sort of slopes down into this garden area where I'm going for. So that's good in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways, I have a challenge capturing all that water. So I don't really have any way to direct it. I do have a well, so I sort of have, and it's on a spring. I have a pond here that they wanted to build the house, and when they drilled for that they found a spring. So there's plenty of water. It's just a matter of getting it where I need it. So my question really is, should I try and plant, because I'm at the beginning stages, plant my garden where I know a lot of that water will come into and sort of gradually, even though if it floods at times, seep into the area? Or should I just plan on a water system actually taking water out of the pipes and putting it into the garden?
I'd say that depends. Probably go out and observe a lot. So I'm going to talk a lot about observing, and I'll give different ideas, but you could probably definitely, because Georgia, do you get kind of consistent rain throughout the year?
We do, and there's especially a lot in the early spring, and then typically we have a drought in the summer, and then more in the fall, like now, with hurricanes and everything. So
so you could plan on having like mostly the natural water that's coming, and then just supplement as needed with whatever other thing you choose. And I'm going to talk in my presentation about some specific different ideas that are out there. As well as like how to harvest what you already have, so you don't have to pay for water, and lots of inexpensive, or you can always go with the more expensive wasting water ways too. Sometimes those are simpler, just depends on what works for your style, really.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have a couple of options. Just I think I'm going to take do sort of a swell towards a perennial herb. You know, just go with the flow and where the water goes. And that way I'm hoping I won't have to kind of water those. Usually the plants around here do pretty well. If they don't do well when I plant and forget, then they just don't make it.
I'm right there with you. Those are my favorite kind of plants.
Plant for lazy because I know how I am. And then I think the actual vegetable garden, I think I will actually probably just run some soaker hoses and just actually make a dedication.
I'm going to tell you something better than soaker hoses.
Right.
Yes.
Because those are annoying.
Perfect. I want a solution, something like that though.
Yes. I'll tell you something better and cheaper.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. And right, we have 1 minute left. So I think it's a good time to just introduce our guest, Sandy Steinfelt, as she is a full-time homeschooling mom with a fascination for studying water. She grew up in the rainy Pacific Northwest and has lived much of her adult life in various deserts. She has a BMA, a Bachelor of Musical Arts in Music Education, orchestral emphasis, and has also enjoyed studying foot zone therapy, herbal healing, and many other natural remedies. She's gotten serious about gardening in Arizona and has harvested over 100 pounds since September. She enjoys learning from nature in lots of ways and has recently started beekeeping. So without further ado, welcome, Sandy. We're so proud to have you here. We've met you through the garden program, and this is what it's all about, is just meeting community and highlighting the community to so that we can all learn from one another. So take it away, and I believe you can screen share, no?
Let's see. I will click right there. Can you see me? Or you can see me hopefully, but can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Awesome. Then I did it. Okay. Get this out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to talk today about lots of different things. It sounds like we tend to have a problem with people having too much water in the group here. But what's really cool about water principles is they're things that work whether you have too much water, too little water. The principles are the same and a lot of times if you have too little water, then when you have any water, it feels like too much because the ground doesn't know what to do with it. So I'm going to teach you some principles, and I'm going to cover like a ton of stuff as fast as I can, so that you have a lot of ideas, and you're going to get a list. You're going to get a copy of the PowerPoint. You're going to get a list of links that you can research later, because I'm just going to like brush across a million different things so that you can know a bunch of different ways to turn. Just like Dave and Nikki introduced me on my first time I met them. They said, oh, you should get this book. And then I got that, and then got into like, whoa, even though I live in the desert, I get so much water and there's so much I can do here. It's so cool. So a little bit about me. Like she said, I grew up where it's really wet, and then I've lived where it's really dry for most of my adult life. And I've harvested 150 pounds, over 150 pounds since September this year, but over 300 for the last year. And I homeschool my boys. I've tried a lot of different irrigation systems, and I'm familiar with them. I'm only going to go into detail with a couple of these, but just to give you an idea, there's lots of different ways to irrigate out there. And I'll talk about some of the lesser known ones later. So first, I want to get you thinking a little bit about why is water important? Like, what does water mean to you? It's more than just getting water to your plants, that plants need it to survive. But it also is really symbolic. A lot of places have holy sites that are related to water, or they have water that's holy for lots of different reasons. So why is water so important in so many religions and cultures and so vital? And people have been using water for as long as there's been people. And if you think about all the successful civilizations, including now, they've all had to figure out how can we use water. And it's always dependent on how can we get water and how can we use that water efficiently, whether it's the ancient flooding of the Nile, the Roman aqueducts, the Native Americans found ways to grow food in the desert and to channel the water in different ways. And then I want you to think about, what do you want to do with your water? And I want to teach you some ways to observe what the water is like at your house. Where is it going? So I don't know if you've already done this. Hopefully you've, I'm sure you have already noticed, you've probably been outside in a rainstorm or some kind of other water event. Here in Arizona, they're called weather action days because apparently when it rains, it's an action day, which just cracks me up. It is an action day. It's let's go outside and find out what's happening because it's really exciting here when it rains, especially if there's thunderstorms. But knowing where is it flowing, walk around your house and see, wow, I have all this water pouring off of this section of the roof and like hardly any here. Or all of it goes in here and this area floods, but this area is dry. And where does it flow off your trees? Where is the water pooling? Where is it sinking? And after you've observed what the water is doing, figure out what do you want it to do? Because that might not be the same thing. And so where do you want it to be going? Maybe you want it to be going away from your property because there's too much of it. Maybe you want it to be staying in different places, but not this place, not in your house, not on your front porch. But where do you want it to stay? You want it to stay in your garden. You want it to stay in your plants. How much rainwater can you use and how much gray water can you use, or do you want to use gray water? By the way, gray water is just, there's your culinary water. Your gray water is the water that's left over from like using your laundry, your dishwasher, some kitchen water, your shower water, things that it's not black water. Black water is the toilet water. You don't want to use that. But your gray water is stuff, even I would consider like gray water kind of being after I cook a pot of beans and I have the leftover water, I can go and dump that on my plants. Instead of just dumping water down the drain, use the water that we already have and put it outside. It can be as easy as hooking a hose onto your washing machine and running it outside so that extra water, if you're using a soap that can be okay outside, can go out there. And I'm not going to get into that much, but it's a thing. And if you want to use your gray water, there's lots of ways you can do that and lots of resources. Some places it's even incentivized. In Tucson, you can get money back if you do that. And find out, kind of what I was saying with you, Tracy, is do you want to use additional irrigation? Do you want to have something else to supplement it, and why or why not? And how much effort do you want to put in? Are you the type of person who like, yeah, I love going out and watering by hand. It's therapeutic for me. I want to be out here every day doing stuff. Or do I want this so I can leave on vacation for a month and all my plants won't die? That's my style. And do you want to put in the effort now? Do you want to put in the effort later? There's lots of different things, and I'm going to talk about some of those, but figure out like what works for you. Because just because somebody likes it one way doesn't mean that it's one size fits all. Figure out where is the water coming from. Like I said, it can be rainwater, gray water, might be tap water, and irrigation might be something that's different than your tap water. It might be the same as tap water, and lots of different types of irrigation. Now I want you to think for a moment. I'm going to make sure I have the chat so I can see. Now, when you think about rainfall, do you feel like that's a help or hindrance? Is that something that you, when it rains, are you getting, oh, I'm so excited, this is awesome? Or are you going, oh no, not again. Why can't we have a little break? Please don't rain. I don't know what to do with this. I don't want this. Just tell me really quick in the chat if you If you're more the left picture with the happy flowers and yay, it's raining, or are you, no, not rain again? And I have a link, again, you'll get sent this. If you get an inch of rain on a 1/4 acre, that's over 6,000 gallons of rain. So chances are, however much rain you're getting, I'm in the desert, I'm pretty sure that I get more rain, even if I only get 10 inches a year. That's more than I'm usually going to need to consume, especially just for my household needs. So it's a matter if you can figure out how to use that. And it's kind of interesting to have a better idea of how much you actually get. Okay, so we're seeing a mix. Some people like it, some people don't like it. So knowing what to do with it can help you be hopefully a little bit more excited. For me, after I did a bunch of stuff with rainwater and observed and implemented things, I was able to go, oh, I'm so excited. I want to see what's different this time. You know, how can I make it so I'm this? And then I'm excited. Hey, it's not in the house. It's like when I take my medical kit, when I go, I'm like, hey, I didn't have to use it. Nobody got scorpion today. Success, right? This is good. We don't have water pooling in the house. We did something good. So even if it's just little things, I want you to be able to celebrate some little things that can make you happy about changes you're making with the rain. Okay. So I know Tracy knows what a watershed is. Some others of you maybe. So a watershed is basically you have the highest point. So on here it's showing the different watersheds. I'm gonna get the okay, my on. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I want to pull up my pen. Pointer option. There we go. Okay, so here you see like the different things. It's like a little circulatory system. So when rain falls here, of course, there's a continental divide that everything goes this way or this way into the ocean, right? But you also have within here, the water basically is going to stay in this system, or it's going to be here. And you have these different like big watersheds through the United States. For me, I'm over here. So we get our water. It comes down from the Colorado River. So our water travels 400 miles to get to us, which is why the tap water is incredibly nasty because it traveled 400 miles in open canals to get down to us. And then you can see here and you can go find out what your watershed is. It can also be divided into smaller things and it gets smaller and smaller. So your smallest watershed, you could consider like your property that you have the rain falls on your roof and it'll fall off one side or it'll fall off the other, right? So if you think of a watershed as just your property, all the rain that falls over here, it's going to end up coming down here. All the rain that falls on this part of the roof comes off here. Rain falls off here. This is a property I've actually worked on, the school I was working at. And so here on this particular house, anytime we got 1 inch of rain, which it's not frequent, it's still the desert, but it often would be like an inch or a couple inches in a week. We'd get hundreds of gas pouring off right here because no gutter right there, but all the space here is all pouring off right here in 1 inch. So if you look at this, where would be the ideal space for a rain garden? You don't have to answer, but think about it. The ideal space would be like right here. That's where you want it, right? That's the easy space, which was my thought. I'm like, oh, that's a perfect spot for a rain garden. We can catch all this water. It doesn't have to flood the porch anymore. It doesn't have to flood here. We'll put a garden right there and it's going to catch all the water because I know all these tricks. But some other developments happened. So we weren't able to put the rain garden here, but I need to find a way to get the water from here to somewhere else. So I'm going to tell you how I did that later. You can go, your county assessor might have this. We're lucky ours does. I just went and I took a roof and it was able to tell me how many square feet there were. And then you can plug it into the tool on Dave and Nikki's and find out how much square footage. Slope doesn't matter at all. You just measure like, okay, so right here, it's almost 1,000 square feet. So that means I'm getting about 600.2 gallons of water because it's about 600 gallons for every 1,000 square feet. On this sort of roof, if you have a tin roof, you're going to be able to harvest a lot more water because that's less permeable. It's not going to soak in, it's just going to fall right off. And if other types are going to soak up more water. Now, this is Brad Lancaster is like the guru of water harvesting. He literally wrote a book on it, has a TED Talk, sorts of stuff. So I draw a lot from him. This was his house when he first got it. Now I want you to look at this diagram and tell me if this was your house, it's showing where the water flows, right? These arrows are showing where water goes. What would be your main concern if this was your property and you went outside when it was raining and you noticed, oh, the water's going where the arrows are pointing? What would be things that you like or don't like about what's working or not working the way the water is flowing here? So just looking at the arrows.
You can type it in the chat box.
Yep, type in the chat.
Too much water toward the house.
Yep, too much water toward the house. So they found it's all going off the property and we want to grow stuff on the property. It's all leaving the property and it's going off the shed and it goes in from the street, pours into the garage, and it goes on the property, goes off the property except for where it goes into the house. So that's kind of a problem, right? By the way, if you have a property like that, before you buy a house, you can look at maps that show where the floodplains are and where fault lines and that sort of stuff are. So when you're house shopping, try to avoid this in the first place and you can save yourself some headache. But Brad Lancaster's the sort who he was excited about this and he did this to it. Isn't that awesome? So he made it look now, it's not going into the house anymore. He's using this, that it's growing trees. He has tours of his house online. You can go and see it. And it made it so it's going off from the street into water the trees here. He's using lots of water that's there. Like he's this sort like, we're going to shower outside. We're not going to use anything extra unless we absolutely have to. It's really cool stuff. And it's, yeah, just an inspiration, all that he's done there. He's growing all sorts of stuff, tropicals and natives, everything. We can grow tropicals out here because it doesn't get too cold in the winter. Also, a lot of you probably deal with your main, or a lot of your precipitation comes from snow. So when you're observing where the water is going, then you can also notice where is the snowfall going and where is it going to be melting to, where does it land? So notice where does the frozen water flow when you're observing. Now here, this is a great example of what you do want. So this, it's totally flooded here, but it's actively raining. So it's okay that that's flooded right now because it all soaks up and to make this beautiful sponge. This soaked it up and all these native wildflowers are thrilled at that. It's not on the walkway. It's not in the houses. So it's all the water is going exactly where it's supposed to because this is lower than this. And in case you think, oh, but those are in the desert, that's just the desert. This is in Portland, Oregon. People are making rain gardens and harvesting water with these cool little like salmon run chutes, having stuff like, hey, we're getting rainwater. Let's have it grow trees on the roof. Now, a lot of people, when they hear rainwater harvesting, they think, oh, you're talking about cisterns or tanks. Like I need to get a rain barrel and hook it up to my gutter, right? My brother lives in Texas near Houston. And he heard about rain barrels. He's like, oh, I'm going to get a rain barrel. I'll hook this up to my gutter. This will be great. And he asked a neighbor, like, oh, about how long do you think it'll take to fill up? They're like, oh, about 15 minutes. And sure enough, he had like this 50-gallon rain barrel. First time it rains, it's overflowing all over. But you can get a lot bigger ones and you can find them. You can make your own. There's lots of different options. So if you need long-term storage and you want to have water available, cisterns are good for long-term storage. You can make them art. You can make them a privacy screen or a wind screen. It's available when you want it, and it can overflow to be piped to other areas. But tanks can get really expensive. They have a limited capacity. That limit might be 1,000 gallons or 10,000 or 5,000, but it's still limited. Bugs like to live in it because mosquitoes love putting their larvae in there. And some places it's illegal, not quite as often as we might think, but it is something to look into. Whereas if you do earthworks, then it's free. It's definitely legal. After you've observed the patterns, earthworks is just making berms and basins. So making it so the earth is capturing it because the earth can hold as much water as you can get to go in there if you know how to get it to go in. It follows the natural patterns that are there. And it's a lot less expensive because it can just cost as much as a shovel. You can get the mulch for free. It does take more work initially to install a rain garden, but it takes a lot less work later because then the rain's doing the work. You don't have to do anything. You just go out and look and see if it's working or not working and change it. So another example of earthwork, it can just be as simple as like a pile of mulch here to say, okay, I want the water on this side, so I'm going to put a pile of mulch and see if it'll go this side or that side, keep it where I want it. So the way to soak it up, you want your water to sink and spread. And that's the kind of the theme of a rain garden, is you get it to sink and spread. So you want the water to sink in somewhere and you want it to spread out, and then it overflows to the next place to sink and spread, next place to sink and spread. So it'll make the earthworks be able to hold more because you have these sponges. The plants are like a sponge and they hold the water. They'll help hold the water in there and bring it up later when you need it. You can place in a strategic location. So if you get a lot of runoff right off of your roof, if you get a lot of runoff off the road and you don't want it going to the backyard, wherever it is, like put it where, when you go out and observe and you see, I have a flooding problem here and all the water is coming from this space, try to get all the water that's coming from wherever it's all pooling, wherever your bad source is, try to get the rain garden to catch that. And still, if you get a ton of rain, then you're still going to get, you know, if it rains 2 inches, it's still going to be 2 inches everywhere. But that 2 inches on the house didn't land inside the house, that fell off the edge of your roof and landed in front of your house or came out your gutter and made a river going down, right? Grasses are often a really good sponge. Native plants are good sponges, whatever is native in your area. That's what's used to being able to soak up that amount of moisture. And it'll help keep the water where you want it. Oh, and if you're making it right under the line, like if on your roof line, if you don't have a gutter, then the line right under your roof line, I call it like the line of death, because I've noticed like, oh, there's plants on this side, there's plants on that side, but right under, they don't like to be there, because if it's falling off my second story, then they're getting pounded. And some plants don't mind. My mint is okay with it, but tomatoes don't like it there. A lot of plants, they don't like having raindrops falling, like pouring down at high speeds off of there. So just keep in mind, like maybe a little bit away from the edge of your house. You don't want it too close to the edge of your house anyway, because you don't want your foundation suffering. Here's just some examples, again, before and after in Brad Lancaster's neighborhoods, that like, look, it's just this, it's maybe soaking into the dirt a little bit, but make all these sponges so it just soaks up all the water that's there. And grasses, like prairies, that's a natural sponge. Now, who is familiar with the idea of rain garden levels? That's true. If you get drainage from the road, there is a problem with contaminants from cars. So I wouldn't recommend planting things you want to eat there necessarily. But you can still plant things that are going to sponge it up. And some people still do things there because it depends on how much it gets diluted, right? I'll show you a picture of somebody who grew pumpkins in street water runoff later. So when you're planting, figure out what your plants need. If they're if they love water, if they need lots of it, you plant them in a lower down level. If they're, like obviously a cactus, you plant up higher so that when the water flows, it starts up here and it flows down here. And this is where it's going to be pooling. And so when this pool gets full, it's going to overflow over to here and have that underwater and overflow here. But it takes a lot more to overflow here, right? So think of where your overflows are. Where is it sinking and spreading? So this is encouraging it to sink and spread right here because it's literally sinking. But it's not going to sink and spread here. But that doesn't need that much water anyway. It gets really mad if you get too much water on one of these. I think that might be what happened to mine, or it just got too hot. I'm not sure. I have a funny leaning cactus. But most of your trees are going to be on a higher level. You don't want those down. If you know that it's really wet where you are, plant your trees up on a mound so that the water goes away. And then all your other plants that you're using as your support species go down below where that don't mind being sitting in the water, but don't have your tree roots sitting in the water. There's lots of lists you can find online of what kind of plants like to be really wet, what likes to be more drought tolerant. So if you live in a place where you're like, I'm always having the water pooling, and I know if I have a rain garden, it's going to be wet like every day, then you're going to want to plant more things on this list that are your water loving plants, or plant them lower down in your rain garden. Now your more drought tolerant plants, figs, guavas, cactus, anything that has desert in the name, then you're going to want to plant higher in a rain garden. And herb spiral is an example you've probably heard of that uses this concept. So it starts in the more drought tolerant stuff up top, and then lower down where the water is going to be sitting more is the stuff that is thirstier and wants more water. So another, like one of my favorite storage things is mulch. I love it because it's free. My husband told me after he looked through this, he's like, you know that you have get chip drop on there like 3 times, right? I'm like, yeah, like if that's the only thing that they get out of this presentation, get chip drop. Because mulch is like the secret sauce in gardening in so many ways. So mulch is awesome because it helps to reduce your weeds. It's going to insulate against extreme temperatures. So when it's getting colder, your plants are going to last a little bit longer. When it's getting hotter, then your plants are not going to be as fried. And it's going to absorb the excess moisture and slowly release it. So if it's in there, and again, you might need to have like a mulched basin so it won't just wash away. So if you just mulch it, it can wash away. I've done that in a place that had flood irrigation. It just like floats up and floats all over and then sets down where it wants. But if you're in a basin, it has to stay within that basin unless it overflows a lot, right? And it's a slow release fertilizer. I was noticing my plants that shortly after we moved here a couple of years ago, I got a chip drop and then I started mulching around all my trees and changing watering and stuff, and how a lot of the trees this year we had like record breaking hot. It was 90 degrees today here. Like that's not normal even in Arizona. It's normally like in the 70s this time of year, but it was 90 degrees today. But my plants, even though it was crazy hot all summer, they're looking okay because they had a ton of mulch under them, and then they had sweet potatoes on top of that. So it shaded their roots, and they didn't mind the extreme temperatures as much as a lot of things did. And they're also looking happier because they're getting that fertilizer too. So it's helping your soil. The soil where I've had the mulch sitting there for, especially if it's a couple of years, but even shorter, it's like underneath, it's like this perfect soil. And all I did, again, like the lazy gardening, I love anything that like I do this once, I take a wheelbarrow, I dump it out, I spread it out, and then it turns into beautiful soil. I like this method. It's easy. And the organic matter is really fun. My kids love looking at like, okay, I'm going to get mulch. Do you guys want to come see how many bugs come out? What kind of different stuff is living in here? Because you can tell that the micro life is going on because it's breaking down. So obviously stuff is doing its job. And you can also tell the macrobiology, like all the bugs in it, is really fun. So over here, I don't know if you can say how fine you want it, but you can say if you want logs or not. I know that. But you can also pay. Get Chip Drop is free. You can pay and get mulch of different sizes. And if you just water your pile, or if you live in a place that gets a lot of moisture, it's going to break down fast anyway. I had my first mulch pile was on top of a sprinkler for a while. And by the time I got down to the bottom of that pile where the sprinkler was, it was like just beautiful dirt because the sprinkler had been going off for like weeks or months. So it was just beautiful dirt. So again, there's lazy options. So this melon over here was grown. I made a rain garden from that spot I showed you on the roof. And the rain garden went out and there was 12 inches of mulch, and this melon plant grew in that. And we had 4 inches of rain that was free, and it was spread out over 4 months. So it was not much water. It was still 100 degrees in between those 4 inches, but we got a melon plant that came because it's a native melon plant. That's like what the Native Americans were growing here. So here's a couple pictures of what I did. I have heard, yeah, the straight pine can be acidic. With the Chip Drop, it comes from arborists. So you're getting a mix of all sorts of stuff. So the Chip Drop, it comes and it looks like this. It's just the arborists, they took everything they'd been trimming, and you can ask them to not send pine or not send oleander or not send things that you don't want in there. And they're usually accommodating. And again, it depends on what it's like in your area. So this is the mulch pile. Day one. Out here, I basically dug a big basin. So over here off screen is the building, and the water got up here. I'm going to show you that on the next slide, how the water got up to here. This is uphill. So we decided this needed to be a parking lot for the school. So the rain garden went up here. So like, okay, I learned how to do this. This will be really fun. I get to learn a new skill to make water go uphill. So the water comes out at the end here, and then it goes down into a series of mulch basins. So it fills up here, and then it overflows to there and there. And all I did was I took the Chip Drop, and over the period of a week of early mornings, because it was summer by then, I just moved it little by little until we got it done. And you can see it overflows going down here. And then I planted stuff and the melon grew right over here. So how I got it to go uphill is it took a lot of time and energy. This is something I personally wouldn't recommend unless you're really into this sort of stuff and know how to lay pipe. I didn't know a thing about laying pipe, but I learned a lot. 4-inch pipe, I think, is probably a lot harder to lay than 1/2-inch pipe too, from what I've heard. So, but if you've laid sprinkler pipe and that's not a big deal to you and you have a trencher, or you're not going that far, having it go like 50 feet uphill was a pain to lay 50 feet of 4-inch pipe in clay soil because it was hard, but it's just hard work. It didn't kill anybody. I learned a ton. So the water comes down here and then you have to lay the pipe. And since the top of the gutter is still higher than the bottom of the pipe where it pops up, then it still is going to come out and it's going to pop out at the end because the water wants to go to wherever is lowest. So it fills up the inside of the pipe. And yes, you have standing water in there until it cleans itself out with the next rain, and then it pops out at the end. So just a series of pictures here showing the lane of the pipe. Had straight shot. Again, got to learn a lot about making pipe fit and stuff. And then at the very end, this is the payoff I got, why I was excited that it was raining, because I spent months of my free time putting this in and having my kids help me. And here it is, the water pouring out when it rained. I'm like, I got water to go uphill 50 feet and it's filling the rain garden, and it did it in the daylight instead of 2 a.m. this time. I was tempted sometimes at 2 a.m. to get out and drive to the school to see what it looked like, but didn't go through with it, but almost. So the water is just pouring out here. This is just a pop-up. I got that at Home Depot. And it just pours out there. So if you don't want the rain garden right next to your house or right where the water falls, you can get it to go wherever it is if you can channel. We had to get gutters to do this. So a couple additional irrigation ideas. There's overhead. Everybody knows that. It's like sprinklers. It's least efficient, but it's really easy, and you can cover a wide area and you can just attach it to a hose. So there's advantages to having overhead sprinklers. And then drip irrigation, it's more expensive, but it's more efficient than overhead. You don't waste as much water. So if conserving water is more important to you than the initial pay, then you might want to go with drip irrigation and have it going to the specific plants that you want to water. There's flood or basin irrigation, which is really good for deep watering, and using you can use gray waters and earthworks. But it's definitely going to be less efficient in your water use, but definitely has some good options there. Then clay pipes or clay pots, or you can do clay pipes too, actually. It's super efficient. It gets the plants exactly what they need. It waters them underground, which is where they want the water. And you can automate it and gravity feed it, or you can buy it already automated, which is probably easier. But I like trying to experiment and make stuff. So I'm trying to make my own gravity feeder instead. And drip tape, which is, I think, the best alternative to soaker hose. And it's really good for row crops, and it's less expensive than a lot of things. And you can water large areas with it. It's really cheap, like less than 10 cents a foot, sort of cheap. And doesn't wear out as fast, but I'll show you that in a bit. And then a drip line or tree circle, and I'll show you that one too. So, so flood irrigation is basically just what it sounds like. You just flood the area that you want the water to seep into. And you can do it on purpose. Out here in Arizona, a lot of properties are on flood irrigation. They have just a big a floodgate, and you pull it up when it's your time for flood irrigation, and the water gushes out, and then you fill the water, and that's what this is. And then the kids all go out and play if it's in the middle of the day, and find random little snakes and frogs and stuff, and just play in the water because it's fun. And it's not black water, it's kind of more gray water, but it's definitely not culinary water. It's pretty gross, but it's still like fun. It's comparable to lake water, I would say. So if you don't mind swimming in the lake, it's similar to that. And you probably already get flood irrigation in places on accident, not on purpose. So you can use it and see if your plant's like that or if it's not working for you. And it works really well to water deep. So here the flood irrigation comes every 13 days, and it is actually super effective. Plants, the trees do just fine to wait 13 days between watering. Even when it's 110 degrees, they're thriving because they just soak that up. They're used to getting in deep watering and they soak it up. It's actually super efficient out here. So here's a picture of my son walking in the flood irrigation. And you notice this is a raised bed because these plants don't like to be underwater. The trees don't mind being underwater. The roses don't mind being underwater, but we made raised beds so that it'll still soak in the water from the sides, but it's not going to be underground or underwater, because a lot of plants, they're not good to be underwater, and your squashes, they don't like to be underwater. Another picture of the flood irrigation. We had a lot of fun playing around to figure out how can we get it where we want and not on the back porch. So I figured out, okay, here's how we can make it so the walkway isn't underwater. And this is a bed that I use flood irrigation on. So just right here, I made a little berm right here, and I grow my lemongrass, loves the flood irrigation. My passion vine is loving it. My licorice plant loves it. Lots of the plants, they just really like getting that deep watering. And because I'm lazy, I just have a hose going out to it, and it's on a timer. So I don't have to do anything except for make sure that nobody turns off the hose spigot. And the hose spigot is on a divider of 4, because I have 4 different hoses going different directions, but some are on timers. And then OLLAS. All right, who has heard of OLLAS or clay pots? Curious, you can, all right. All right, the people who introduced it to me are, some people are. Okay, so OLLAS are really cool. Native Americans are using this. It's actually been ancient Chinese stuff. It's cultures all over the world. They use this. So OLLAS are clay pots, and you can find them in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, literally. If you're into pottery, you can make it yourself. I'm not that kind of skilled and hardcore, so I don't make it myself. The first one I got was one I bought, so I didn't have to try to have the learning curve. I'm like, I'm going to try this, see if I like it, and then I'm going to go from there. But the idea is that you have this empty clay pot, and they're really easy to make like this. You just go find wherever you can find them cheapest on sale. You glue it together here, put a stopper in the bottom, you fill it through this hole here. But the water goes in the top. And so this is a clay pot full of water, and the roots will draw out what they need, because the clay is a porous surface. So it gradually releases depending on how wet it is around it. So it's not going to over release. So some people go, oh yeah, I've totally done that. I took a pop bottle and I poked some holes in it and I buried it. Or I took a milk jug and I did the same thing. So I've totally done it, OLLA. It's not quite the same. That's still good because it gradually releases it, but it's not the same, because milk jug is going to gradually release, but it's going to be at a constant rate, and it doesn't care if it's still wet out. Whereas the clay is dependent on how wet it is outside. So it's going to pour water out until it's released to make it the right amount of moisture that it's not going to release more. And the plants actually will have their roots grow to it and draw the water out. So it'll look like they're not getting watered because it's not wet on the top, but the plants are happy and you see plants thriving around it. And you can go online and you can just do a search for DIY OLLAS and see a bazillion results for how to do it. Lots of fun ways, and I've experimented with a couple of them. I'll show you some. So here's what I have learned about OLLAS. So this is my OLLA. All you see above, yep, you bury them. So this is my OLLA. It goes underground, this big pot, and just a little top with a silicone lid. If you leave the lid off, bugs crawl in them, by the way. So I made a mulch bed. Sunken beds are really effective out here. And hold on, see a question. So depending on how big your OLLA is and how wet it is how long it'll be. So this OLLA, it's, I want to say a 3 liter, and I was able to fill it twice a week, but it's really hot, dry out here. But you can also have ones, it might be less than that, or it probably won't be less than that. That's in the middle of a hot summer here. So I bet it wouldn't be more than twice a week. But that's the job that I have my kids do. Go open the Oya, check and see if it's full. And I found a way to automate it too, so I can save a little bit of effort. So I made a mulch bed here. And so I just made a basin about a foot deep and then put an Oya in it, filled it with mulch and stuff, put an Oya in it. And I soaked it a couple times to help that mulch be decomposing, and planted a bunch of seeds in there just to see what would happen. So here's what I found that happened. If you don't fill it and it floods, so I have a roof over here and I didn't have gutters at that time. So it flooded and I found out that they actually float and it turns into like a cute little boat that's floating on top of what you thought was a garden. But what was really cool is because this bed was full of mulch, it looked like this. Later in the day, it was totally like all soaked in and happy. Again, and I buried the Oya back in. So empty Oyas float, and a lot of water can come off. So it was really fun. I decided after that, I'm like, let's make our own Oyas. And so me and my boys, we went and made Oyas, and it was a really fun project. They loved getting to like use a little caulk gun, and we made them so they're automated. So these are drip irrigation fittings. So I have it set up to a gravity system because I'd rather fill 6 Oyas at one time instead of filling them individually. And I can't convince my kids to do it for me. So we just have it hooked up to a 50-gallon tank instead, which I'll show you later. It's really easy to do. You just dig a hole, put it in, fill it with water. So again, like kids can do it. It's fun. And you can fill more than one at a time. So here I just have a 1/2-inch tubing. If I were to do this again, I would probably keep 1/2-inch tubing all the way because this is more likely to clog if you have anything else in it. But you can see here how it's a darker color. That darker color is because it's full of water. So I was testing it out, filling it with water. Again, knowing, so the water level's way up here. And so it's going to fill because this is lower than the top of the water level, even though that's bumping here. So before I buried them, I checked them. So that's full of water. And I had it going out there so it'll fill them for me so I don't have to fill them individually. And here's a picture of our little cilantro forest that we grew there because it's invisible, but it's still super effective. And then we had right outside our back door, all you can eat cilantro for the right season. And here's what I did with mine. Like I said, I made it gravity. So my dad helped me install gutters up here, which is a simple DIY project if you know what you're doing and watch enough videos or have a really talented dad. So I put the gutter going down here and it goes into this tank. And so instead of having the line of death going on my Oya garden right there, now it's going into this tank. And the tank I have here, a spigot, so I can turn it on and off because my Oyas aren't quite leak proof. And so I turn it on when I want to film and then I turn it back off after I can tell that they're starting to come out the top. And then I have an overflow here because it does fill up really fast when it does rain. And if it's not raining, then I just unscrew the little hole here and I put the hose in and I fill it up and fill them up the same way, just with hose water instead. But the overflow, it goes over to here so it can water over there when it's starting to overflow. Otherwise, it just gushes out here, which kind of works and kind of doesn't. And then drip tape. This is my favorite alternative to soaker hose. So it's pressurized, which makes it more effective because it isn't like, oh, this is the low point, so all the water comes out here and not up here like on a soaker hose, right? It's more durable too. It is a low pressure. So it's about 10 PSI instead of like, I think it's 25 or 35 PSI is what you usually get in a drip irrigation system. But with a few tricks, you can make it connect to the higher pressure systems. You just use on-off valves. So I have existing drip irrigation at my house. So I connected drip tape there because I want more plants than the cute little ornamentals that were around. And I just ran drip tape really long, going out instead, connecting to the existing drip irrigation system. It's super inexpensive if you get in bulk. And I do have some in bulk. If people want to buy it, you can contact me and I can sell it to you for 10 cents a foot, or 10 cents a foot, or $1 for 10 feet. It's harder to find. So I wasn't able to find this at Home Depot or at other places, but I found it online and there's a number of places that sell it online. I was able to find the connectors on Amazon easily enough that it connects to. And it's really good for high density planting, but not recommended for xeriscaping. and it's good for straight lines. So this isn't necessarily around your trees, but this is in your garden, your row crops. So here's the drip tape. It gets pressurized. This isn't on, but it plumps up more when it's on, but it has a little hole here and here and here. So just little holes along the way, and you can get it in 6-inch, 12-inch, 18, 24. And it'll just have that, and everywhere there's a hole, you put a plant. And it's still, you have this on for like hours instead of, you have it on for hours or a long time. It's not a like, you turn on the water for 5 minutes and it's done. It's slowly watering out all over the place, or all over there, and it'll split out. Oh, Tracy, yes, the OLLA does water the plants near it, but it can be like a 2-foot radius, and it depends on the size. Yeah, I bought 4,000 feet of drip tape, so I have plenty to share, because I'm like, it's a good deal. I'm sure I can find people who want this. So if you want some, let me know. And here, the drip tape just connects to a normal 1/2-inch tubing, and it uses these just twists on. It's really easy to use, especially if you've ever done any kind of drip irrigation system. And I found drip irrigation, there's a bazillion like how-to videos from all the drip irrigation companies out there. They want you to know how to do it. And then you have all the like actual farmers showing how to do drip tape and how it's so much better than soaker hose. So there's lots of videos on this. And this is a garden here. We have drip tape going out from zow line. Too lazy to bury it, so we just have it going from a hose with a pressure regulator to make it 10 psi, and a 1/2-inch here, and it drip tape going out to water in those beds. Another option is drip circle. So this one's better for your trees and shrubs. This is around one of my palm trees. And so it's the same type idea. It has just little holes along the way. This one you can find at your like Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, those sort of things. So this one was really easy to find. And it waters evenly because it's pressurized, and it'll water all around the tree. What this poor palm tree had before is it had this tubing coming up, but it had just one head emitter. So the palm tree was getting watered only right here, and all my other trees had that. And I was surprised because they were still doing okay when we got the house, but trees naturally, they don't get watered in only one spot. When it rains, they don't get watered only right here. You know, rain doesn't only fall on one side. So they want to get watered all the way around their drip line generally. So that's where you put the drip circle. And so one thing is think about what is your style? Are you, so do you want to learn a lot? Do you want to like, okay, I'm going to have an adventure and it might take me a lot and it's going to be really hard, but I'm going to learn and I'm going to have an adventure and I have some buddies to do it with? Or do you want to have this and you want it in, you know, this week and you don't care and you're willing to pay somebody to do it? Or do you want a little bit of both? Decide whether you want to do it yourself, whether you want to hire somebody. And for any of this, there's DIY options. There's buying it. There are companies out here, at least, and I'm pretty sure in other places out here, there's a company that will install your gutters and they will pipe it out to a rain garden and they'll dig the rain garden for you. And I think they'll even put in the plants and stuff. Like they'll do the landscaping. You just say, okay, go make it beautiful. You know, put in the rain tank and put the passion vine growing next to it. And so there's companies out here that will do that. And I think they probably exist other places. Or if you can come up with your own ideas of what you want, you could still hire landscapers to do it for you. It's not a problem here because our ground doesn't freeze, but if you do OLLAs, they're not a winter thing because the water in them would make them crack. So if it does freeze where you're at, then you need to take the OLLAs out in the winter. So that's something if you're considering like, oh, OLLAs sound awesome, because they are. That is one more thing that if it freezes in the winter, that's going to be some effort that you're going to have to dig it up as part of your winter preparations. And figure out whatever it is you want to do, like baby steps. So where are you at now? What's the next thing? It doesn't have to be that I'm going to stop all flooding everywhere on my property, but can I put like one line of mulch here and the next time it rains, I'll see what happens and see if it changed a little bit. Or I want to put in one OLLA in my garden and see if this tomato does better than that tomato or something. So figure out You don't have to do everything all at once. You don't have to make mistakes in a grand manner if you don't want to, but you can. Like, you can buy 100 trees and then test things out and find out, oh, that didn't work. I just learned a $10,000 lesson. There's lots of options, but baby steps are totally okay. And then a couple common problems that people come across. So if you have too much water, which it sounds like a lot of people have, then figure out how you can make the water sink and spread, and where is your overflow. So make it sink and spread, then have an overflow, and then have it sink and spread, have an overflow, and add more sponges and lots and lots and lots of mulch, and have it in a mulched basin so that the mulch isn't floating away. Use water loving varieties. So if this is your backyard, like, plant things that like to be floating in the water. Walk around places that things are naturally growing. If you see trees that are, spend part of the year underwater or spend weeks underwater because the river level rises and the trees don't mind, those are the kind of trees that are going to be good. But if you see things that when they get underwater, they die, that's not what you want in a really wet spot. And you can do raised beds is going to be better. If it's going to be really wet, have a raised bed so you can control that water level better. And you can even do raised beds for like your trees. So you just build the tree up, like I said, like on a mound or a couple inches above the ground so that it's not getting too wet. And find out, wherever you are, find out what the native people did. Chances are, wherever you live, there were people who lived there before they had irrigation being piped to them. Figure out what they were doing, what kind of things they were growing, how they were watering it, how they were diverting the water different places. And just copy what they did, because they figured it out that way. We can too. Here's an example of, I showed you this picture earlier, but what I didn't tell you is that what we did here is we scraped this down 4 inches. So we thought, oh, we'll have garden here. This is going to be great. And we'll get the flood irrigation, which is super cheap. And so we scraped it down 4 inches and then found out it's this really hard clay. So it was not permeable. And we had an unusually wet winter, which is nothing compared to what I know a lot of you experience in the winter, but it was very wet for Phoenix Valley. And so we found that winter that it was overflowing here. And it was like this, not just when we were irrigating, but it was like that for like weeks, which is not good. Luckily, it wasn't mosquito season, but it was still like, we didn't want a pond there. We wanted to be growing food there. And the mulberry tree doesn't mind, but so we found there's too much water here. The water isn't sinking in. We tried planting different things to help aerate the soil, but they were not digging up the clay as fast as we wanted. So instead, what we did was we took a truckload of mulch, dropped it off, and filled the entire area with mulch. And then to designate where the beds were, we took some, they were hydroponic beds, but we got a deal and poked some holes in them so they'll still drain, and made it so here's our sunken beds, because sunken beds are still a better option here, because they don't lose as much moisture. But we filled the whole area with mulch, and now it doesn't have a flooding problem because it fills up with mulch. When it was grass, it didn't have a flooding problem either because the grass sponged it up. But when it was just hard clay, it might as well have been cement, and cement doesn't absorb water very fast. So if your problem is you don't have enough water, like we do for a good portion of the year here, and especially lately, then have sponges, because they're going to help the water go up and down. They're like elevators that bring it up. And again, sink and spread, same as if it's wet. Divert the water to where you want. And if you think about, if you have over 6,000 gallons for every inch on a 1/4 acre, you probably have more water than you think you do. And use earthworks to keep it where you want it. And find out what the natives did. And use drought tolerant varieties that don't mind going for a long time. Like that melon I showed you, it was drought tolerant. So it didn't care that it's a month of 100-degree temperatures before the next rainfall. It's like, okay, I'm going to grow really tasty melons anyway. So finding the local varieties is really good. And again, like I was saying, sunken beds. If you have a problem of bad drainage, I recommend before you plant any trees ever, always dig a hole. It's called a percolation test. So you dig a hole where you want it, and then you fill it with water, let that drain out because the first time doesn't really count. And then fill it with water again, and then see how long it takes it to drain. So I did this, and one place that I'm like, oh, I really want a tree here. This will be really fun. And then I filled it with water, and then I went and checked, and it should be like, you count it in hours. 2 days later, there was still water in the hole at about the same level. I'm like, oh, I don't think that's a good place for a tree. because trees don't like to be in like the same water. So if it's not draining out of a hole with air and being able to evaporate, it's not going to be draining when it gets watered. So what I did was I dug down deeper to break through that layer of the hard clay, the caliche, until I was able to get like, okay, I poked through, I punctured through that caliche layer, and then it was able to drain. And I did the test again and it was able to drain. Other option is that you build up the level, some more of that raised bed sort of thing. But always just make sure you check before you do that. And so what I did was I filled the hole that was there. I filled it up. I put a palm tree we chopped down. I put the palm tree stump in there so it can work as a sponge until I get the tree I want to go in there. Cause I'm like, the palm tree will break down. It's not doing me any good as a dead palm tree on my lawn. So if the plants are struggling from the wrong water amounts places, then use the rain garden levels. Put your thirsty plants lower down, your plants that want less water higher up. You can change the level around them. So if you have a plant and you planted it and you didn't realize that it should have been higher up, dig down around it. So it's, is that, or if you planted something and it's, so if you want it higher up, dig a basin around it. So it's kind of simulating that. If you planted it too low, then, you know, or if you planted it too high, then you can try to get the water to divert to it still. If you use OLLAS, it helps the plants choose the amount of water they can get. Add mulch. Like I said, if that's one thing you get, like add mulch, it's going to solve a lot of your problems. And if it didn't work, try adding more mulch and it'll probably help. And use the living mulch, those sponge plants, to help too. And plant the plants with similar water needs together, or plant ones that are going to be complementary. So if you find, oh, this plant is getting watered too much, I'm going to plant this to help soak up some of the water so it's not getting overwatered. If your problem is you don't have as much money as you'd like to spend, get a good shovel, or find a good shovel and create earthworks. It's just as expensive as a shovel. Or you can dig with your hands or a spoon if you really want to go super low budget, but I'd recommend a shovel. You could make clay pots from scratch if you're into that. Just use whatever you can find, use what you have. Do get chip drop. Use your gray water, use your rainwater. So use the water you already have that's free or that you've already paid for. And if you use super efficient watering techniques, it is going to save on the water bill. And if you make sure you're not overwatering, that saves on your watering bill. A bunyip is another cool tool to measure. So when you're figuring out, and I'm not going to go into detail on this, but if you want to know, like, okay, where's my overflow? Is it going to go lower? There's this tool. It's just a yardstick and tubing. Really fun homeschool project, but you can look at the link. You'll get sent that later. But you can go and find out what is the level difference. So where is the water going to go when it rains here? If you don't want to take the time all the time, you can hire somebody to set it up for you, or you can make it automated. So I like to have as much as I can automated. So it's on a timer, so I don't have to worry about it. And get a moisture detector. One of these, it's like $10. And you put it in and it tells you this is really wet. So a lot of times plants will show the same symptoms of stress. If they're overwatered, is underwatered. So you get this and you can tell which it is. So you don't go, oh, it looks like it's suffering. It must be not enough water. I'll water it again. But if you check that and you see, oh, it says it's like way over here on the wet meter, I better not water it again. Or if you find that it's way over here, oh, it's probably thirsty. That's why it's suffering. So just saves a lot of that. If your problem is you don't know what's going on, then take more time to look around, observe what's going on, and try different plants. I love taking plants, and I'll take the same plant and I'll say, okay, how's it do over here and here and here? So I have tomatoes in like 6 different spots around my yard, just to see where they're happy or where they're not happy, and see, okay, it died here. What's the problem? Why did it die here? And why is this one thriving? What's so special about this spot that makes it so happy? And what can I do to like make that even better and copy that in other places? So this is a quick example. The house I grew up in, my parents' house, they planted redwood trees, and all these trees, I'm going to show you a bunch of different angles. All these trees were planted at the same time. Now, if you look at the trees here, you notice over here, there's like big trees. And then over here, you can barely see them there. So zoom in there, these littler trees that are like stunted growth. So if you observe, my theory on this is I know that over here, there's a creek that goes over here. And so I know that creek is prone to flooding. So the plants over here are going to be getting more water. There's also a ditch along here. So the plants over here, they might have got flooded, especially when a beaver built a dam over there. They might not have liked that. They might not have liked being extra wet. And maybe these trees liked being less wet. But there's also like, it could be the placement, lots of things. But observe and have redundancy so you can see what different things are going on. If your problem is you want to be off grid and you want to like do all the things and go hardcore, you can use more gray water. You can have an outdoor shower, composting toilets and urine diverters. This is a really cool, like the washing machine, outdoor washing machine. He has it set to like, we're wild with the orange, and then next time move it to the peach and the fig and the like, just really cool thing. And you can harvest from your street. You're growing up all that runoff so it's not going back into the drains. And if you're wondering, like, where do I start? How do I know what to do? Start by just paying attention wherever you are, whatever is going on. Pay attention next time it rains and figure out, like, where is the water coming? Where is it going? Even if you're on the road, like, is the water staying on the roadway? Is it falling off? Why is it doing that? Even if you're like baking, pay attention. What's the water doing? It's, you know, is it soaking in there? Is it pouring down here? Can I make mounds? You know, have fun like when you were a kid playing in the mud. And then just figure out where is the water going and why does it do that? And try to figure out how to think like water. What does it do? Why does it do it? And think about what the water means to your life and your home and your yard. Pick one thing out of like I covered a ton of stuff. Pick something that you want to try or you want to learn more about. You can go and, especially if it's getting colder and you're not going out and doing much gardening, go on some of the calculators, figure out how much rain your property is getting. Pay attention when you're out on walks and hikes, what grows well, what's not growing, what likes to grow in the water, what likes to be further away. Why are there things growing here and not here? What would the water be doing in this when it's raining? And get a moisture detector. Here's some resources. Gardening with less water is like tons of how to use different systems, make your own systems. Really like must have, especially if you want to not have to use much water. Wherever you are, get like native seeds. And I mentioned like Brad Lancaster, a million things. He has a website full of stuff, rainwaterharvesting.com. Or yeah, I think, or harvesting rain, I think, because it looks like grain. That's how I remember it. You can buy pre-made OLLAS. And again, I'll send you this list so you don't have to copy everything. That'll be sent out to you, and get chip drop again. So I covered a ton. Are there any questions? Anything people want to ask?
Wow, Sandy, that was so amazing. I've learned so much from you and your different experiments with the water. And I feel like I know what you guys think. Any more questions? Was that helpful?
It was amazing. So much information. Thank you so much. I have one question. I'm looking at this passion fruit and I have some growing wild in the back. And I'm wondering, do you ever, like, when you're observing, if you notice something wild or weed, a certain type of weed, do you say, okay, this, you know, I don't know enough about plants to be like, so do you go look it up and say, like, what kind of soil does that like, and then try and plant something like that need in that same area? Obviously, you know, it'll do well.
Yeah, I guess I also like to take it one step further and figure out, like, what is the weed is this? Yeah, I love the crooked cactus, except for I can't make it straighten back up. I figure out I have mallow growing, and I know it's because it's like, oh, this is clay soil, it needs aerated, we're going to aerate it. And right. I know that mallow's edible. And so I just tell the kids, like, go munch on the mallow, go eat all the mallow you want. And so I figure out, for me, I pick and choose which weeds I even want to pull up, which ones I consider weeds, and which ones are like, oh, this is pokey, I don't want it. This is not pokey and we can eat it, go for it. But yeah, figuring out, like, okay, something with the deep tap roots growing well here, and something without, this wants to hold the soil together, it's growing well here. And actually, if you use a lot of mulch, you don't have as many weeds anyway. So if you have mulch all over everything and you cover it with like ground cover, so where I have sweet potatoes growing, I don't have weeds growing, which is like even Bermuda grass, which is also called devil grass for a reason. It's not growing where my sweet potatoes were.
I just, mine was expanding while I was watching this, because I was thinking plant a garden, but as I'm thinking about the rest of my property, there are places that are like microclimates that kind of already have, maybe I stick a pumpkin out there with the passion fruit and just see what it does, and just thinking all that.
Totally. I have tomatoes growing under my palm trees and under my peach tree, because I want to see, like, the one under the peach tree is doing really good right now. Actually, it has little tomatoes growing on it. It survived the summer even.
Great.
So yeah, I
Thank you so much.
like different things. Yeah, thank you.
It totally inspired. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, thanks so much, Sandy. Well, you have Sandy's email there for any other questions. We'll send out the replay to those who didn't get to see it, and the links that Sandy shared with you all tonight. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. I know this is like the kind of webinar that you want to probably hit replay on when you want to, you digest it for a little bit, and then you want to like review it later on when you really want to tackle that water problem. But thank you, Sandy, for your time, for all this talent. I'm so proud of you and how much you've grown and in so many aspects of gardening, and I'm just amazed. So I have a bunch of notes for myself. So everybody will say goodnight here, because we're at the top of the hour again, and we will let you go. But if you have any questions, sandy@jexkids.com, especially if you need drip tape. Sandy has too much of it, so she's happy to just, if you pay her shipping and that the very, very small $1 for 10 feet that she has, you're not going to get it anywhere else better than that price. That'll help her.
You can if you get it 4,000 feet.
It'll help her not have so much clutter, and you guys as well. So, all right, thank you. Have a good night, and I'll end here. Bye.